a lot of those things have wound up being like the most actually successful distinguishing things about Rhodora. A lot of people don't even know that we're zero waste or carbon neutral, but they do know that we're post like 1 out of 5 of the most notable pop-ups like in New York. By empowering the staff, they took so much initiative that just had nothing to do with me. I've never seen that just kind of emerge until I put this system in place.
Henry Rich is the managing partner of the Oberon Group. As managing partner of Purslane, Rucola, Joan, Rhodora, Anaïs, and the Accord Market, Henry has been working towards providing sustainable, healthy, delicious, and affordable food in Brooklyn since opening Rucola in the spring of 2011.
I think I'm in a market where if what you make is good and it resonates with people, they will be loyal. And if it's not considered good, there's nothing you can really do about it. There is no amount of marketing that will be enough. We don't do a ton of tableside storytelling about our sustainability because the things that we do to make the restaurant sustainable are not a legible part of the guest experience. For us, all of the sustainable decisions are like where we buy our stuff, how we prepare our stuff, and then the fact that we compost after the fact, again, not really a part of the guest experience. So I don't blame the guest for not understanding or being confronted with all of the things that we do to make it sustainable because it's not salient to their actual reasons for going out or their experience of it. Yeah, well, it was COVID and all the restaurants were, shut down for a time and needed something to do. We had gotten interested in, carbon neutral and zero waste operations a little bit earlier when I realized that food was responsible for, 30% of global emissions, give or take. And then this program came up, and one of the biggest parts anybody who has a restaurant will know is everything that happens before it's open. The build out and food can be a little wasteful, events can be very wasteful, but the process of building something is just like insane. Dumpster after dumpster. Maybe there's a perfectly built space, and maybe you walk into it, want to change something, and it's like dumpster after dumpster. Not just in terms, there's waste, not just in terms of money, but also just, the environmental footprint. So just really wanting to understand the entire impact of our business from the food system side and the building side. And we don't really do anything with transport or energy. So those were the main pieces for us. Yeah.
Wow.
That's
So you
amazing.
had an inkling before you sort of got into this that you were interested in. How many restaurants did you have at that point when COVID hit?
We had 6 and then we had 4. Um, but I think it was around 2017 that we made the commitment across the group to start thinking about our carbon footprint. And it was um, another restaurateur, actually, this guy, Anthony Mian, who co-founded Mission Chinese and went on to start this nonprofit that helps restaurants, figure out and offset their carbon footprints, investing in regenerative agriculture to offset. So he sort of opened my eyes that I think it was 5 or 6 of the top 10 things that one could do to abate carbon emissions were in the food system. So we didn't have a sustainability mission for the first 5, 6 years of running the businesses. It came a bit later.
Okay. And so when did you open your zero waste wine bar? What was the spark for that idea? And then how did you make that happen in real life?
So I went to a food and sustainability conference in Stockholm in 2018 called Eat. And there was a speaker named Lauren Singer who was famous for keeping all of her trash over the course of 6 years in a mason jar. So she was just very, very careful about what she, yeah, it's kind of an insane experiment. Very careful about what she bought. Um, Everything else was recycled or composted and, very anti plastic. And she introduced me to a chef named Doug McMaster, who has a restaurant called Silo in London. And Silo operates without a trash, period, full stop. So no
Yeah.
trash, no ability to do anything with the trash. So, they're just very, very careful about what they buy. And if it can't be upcycled, recycled, composted, they basically stop it from coming in the restaurant because they have nowhere to put the trash. So we did a pop-up with Doug, that involved, kind of various like sustainability food panels and things like that in late 2018. And he showed us how to run, a zero waste restaurant. So that became Rhodora. We fell short. We couldn't do a fully trash free restaurant, so we did a trash free wine bar. Because the American food system obviously runs on plastic, and he's in London, and it just maybe it's feasible to do this in New York, but we couldn't figure it out. So it's yeah, it's a challenge, and obviously, we had a restaurant that was there. We closed for 3 months. We reopened Rhodora, and we reopened like with an on-site composter with a machine that kind of electrolyzed salt and turn it into soap. We had all of this new infrastructure to allow us to operate in this way. And then in the worst case where, somebody would come in with their kid, they'd rip open a bag of chips and just leave it there. We wouldn't take it out to the corner. We worked with this company, TerraCycle, to privately recycle anything that made it through the door. So
And Rhodora
that's Rhodora.
Rhodora famously does not have trash cans. This is like
Yes.
this is a thing, right? I want to talk about that because like I think when you're an operator and the concept of running a green restaurant kind of pops in your mind, I think it just feels overwhelming, number 1. So like I want to understand kind of the first steps, and this sounds like maybe something that was one of those kind of first ideas. It's like, okay, well, let's just not have trash cans. I want to hear about that. But how did you operationalize like zero waste from front of house to back of house and like keep both team and guests like on board with that mission?
I think keeping the team on board is the main piece because, in a restaurant, obviously operating profitably is extremely challenging already. And anything that you do around sustainability, whether it's separating out trash and or like recycling and compost, operating without trash, composting in the prep kitchen, all these things it is an extra step. It is an extra thing to think about when you're already thinking about quality, cost, and speed. So kind of creating buy-in so that taking a difficult job and making it more difficult didn't create resentment on the team is extremely important. And it's an evergreen thing to work on. As far as the guests go, I mean, people see carbon neutral, zero waste, they assume it's greenwashing or they don't really care that much, but nobody's like, I'm not going to go there. Right. I wouldn't say that there's a huge marketing benefit, but in terms of the kind of people that we've been able to partner with, we had a partnership with TED Countdown that was really interesting in terms of all the other amazing kind of food sustainability nonprofits. And in terms of the team, like feeling like they work somewhere that is in line with their values, all of those things are incredibly valuable. The guests, I think it's a bit there's so many sustainability claims made by so many companies. You don't have time to track down each one. So I wouldn't do it assuming there's going to be a huge like boost in sales.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is like it's more than a feel good, like I would say, right? Like you may not necessarily be able to look at the P&L and be like, okay, I can attribute this to the fact that we're zero waste, but it's more than just feeling good about how you're operating.
I think feeling good counts for a lot, coming out of COVID and, having all those challenges and having to like dig out from debt and like operate in conditions of uncertainty. I actually think having a mission for myself as a founder and for all the people working there, um, we are pushing a conversation. We've talked about this to millions of people. There are a lot of people have come to us and ask how to do it. But I think the other interesting thing is once you introduce a mission, any mission other than just survival for a restaurant, I do think it's just psychologically healthy for And it could be, platforming, with some other community members around you, and letting them do a pop-up in your kitchen, which Rhodora also does, or a more fair wage setup. Having any of those things, I do think makes the, dealing with like the call in the middle of the night when the dishwasher breaks a little bit more bearable in the long run. And so I'd recommend it very much from a, wanting to like who you are when you look in the mirror point of view.
So, having the mission of being zero waste, do you feel like it's been one of the kind of philosophical elements of the restaurant that has galvanized the team? Like you said, oh, it's easy, but you have and for any average listener, we have a lot of operators that listen, that's one thing, but general public needs to be aware of the multitude of moving pieces in a restaurant and the amount of people that come through the door. There's a training component, right? Certainly as you onboard new staff to that philosophy and kind of getting down or getting the cascade effect right
Mhm.
into the staff. So I guess what I'm asking is you know what is the kind of shared perspective of the staff? Like it's like, is it like, that it's cool that we do this, or do you have like some real diehard, sustainability advocates on staff that help manage the process? Like, what does it look like from an operational perspective?
So I interviewed every person in the whole reopening team, because in order to make it such that it was something that everybody was bought into, we removed normal levels of hierarchy. So we removed like the executive chef, we removed the manager, and we told everybody that they'd all be doing everything, from kind of serving and cooking and, washing dishes and
True
making
cross
drinks.
training.
Yeah, and there was just one kind of, role that and people kind of flowed in and out because where I had seen normal sustainability efforts kind of hit the rocks. If you have some owner who's like, "Hey guys, we're doing this now," and it just doesn't happen, it creates a huge amount of resentment. And I had to ask people like, do you want to work at a place where you're going to have to do all this extra stuff? And a lot of people said no, you know. But I described it. I was like, okay, you get to work at a place where you make more money per hour. You get to do, a different job every day. You're not going to have a manager or a boss telling you what to do. And by the way, our mission is like, climate positive restaurant. And some people were like, I can't believe this is real. I mean, but I would say a good half of the people were just like, I've worked my whole life up through this hierarchy to get to a certain place, not about to just like walk on and wash a dish. So, and that also makes sense. So everybody who actually opted in was really on board. And, we have some atypical things that we do. So there's no manager, but we have some people that do weekly admin tasks outside of the typical. So like running payroll, maybe we'll pay somebody a couple $100 a week. Somebody comes in and preps the food, right? That's like a kind of a half-time job. And what kind of stands in for that, typical hierarchy is just building a relationship with the whole team, right? So
Yeah.
once a year, we take this trip out to the Natural Wine Fair in the Loire Valley, or Natural Wine Bar. So obviously, it's helpful for work, but also it's just an amazing kind of 4 days to just spend with the team and actually connect with them on individuals. And it is not like a super expensive trip, but it is an expense. But the amount of kind of additional benefit that we receive from it literally all year from every single person on the team, pays for it 50 times. So, yeah,
I'm
so
sure
that's how we
there's an
did it there.
educational component to it as well, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, if you've, not been to Ladiv before and you go and you taste over 1,000 wines over the course of 4 days, and we're doing vineyard visits, we're doing things that I'd never done, despite buying wine for years. So it's an incredible opportunity. But you kind of like if you're going to again, like if you're going to make life a little or a lot more annoying for people who are operating the business, you kind of need to layer in these tangible, intangible benefits. But there are many, at Rhodora and, working sustainably in general.
When you said, when you were interviewing people for the restaurant, that one of the benefits was that they would make more money, I think a lot of people associate sort of running a sustainable kitchen or running, you know, a zero waste operation with making less money. How are you able to financially make this work and also, it seems, pay your employees more?
In a few different ways. We're paying them more per hour because they're doing more things than a typical server. So, we're at the real minimum wage, no tip credit, which is a pretty significant difference in New York. Um, and then we're able to run the place with very few people per cover. And so the tips that they take home are just categorically different than um, the other restaurants. So, um, they do well. The guests seem to love it, and it's a thriving business as well, and a great community. And I think the most interesting thing about Rhodora to me is, we had this normal restaurant business in the space, and then replaced it with Rhodora, which was this mission-driven business. But the mission was sustainability, and then as a byproduct of sustainability, we had this sort of, very democratic style of running this business. And then all the people, because we had opened the space for something other than just like survival, profit, the restaurant industry is hard. Let's just like get through to the next day. Because we opened this space to do something other than that, people started bringing other missions into the picture. So, they started setting up pop ups with people from all over the world that didn't have platforms, and they started supporting nonprofits like One Love Community Fridge in the neighborhood. And they took initiative that no one's ever taken in our other restaurants to support causes. I think just because it wasn't just a business, now we had like a mission. Suddenly all these other really beautiful missions kind of crept in a great way. And a lot of those things have wound up being like the most actually successful distinguishing things about Rhodora. A lot of people don't even know that we're zero waste or carbon neutral, but they do know that we're host like 1 out of 5 of like the most notable pop-ups like in New York. So by empowering the staff, they took so much initiative that just had nothing to do with me. And I've never seen that just kind of emerge until I put this system in place. That'd be another huge, huge benefit.
How does Rhodora fit in with your other restaurants? Like, with the overall Oberon Group?
Yeah. So everything that we do has 3 components now, like, or 2 out of 3, kind of community, culture, and climate. So we've always had community driven spaces where it's there for a specific group of people. So whether it's a nightclub or a movie theater or the first natural wine bar in Brooklyn, we always want to add to, or just like a neighborhood that needs a third space that just doesn't have one. We always want to be additive, because one, again, it gives you an additional non-financial reason to do the thing. The two is this better business if you have a community that actually wants you to be there. Um, so Rhodora, it's an amazing community spot. It's sustainable. Doesn't really have a cultural component. We're working on, a restaurant in the new museum right now that has all 3. We've also done things with nightclubs and, dancing and, um, movie theaters that had that cultural component as well. But like I didn't own all of those businesses, so they didn't necessarily have a sustainability component, but we always try to have 2 of the 3. And then the other thing that we've been doing lately, are projects in the Catskills. So I opened a kind of a local grocery store, where I live part-time upstate, and we're also working on like a hotel with a bike shop and a restaurant there as well. So,
Gosh, wow, you have a lot going on.
um, Yeah, I mean, it feels like we have our things that we do. We try to do sustainability things, community things. We partner with cultural organizations, and we're in between Brooklyn, downtown, and the Catskills. But we're not like opening places in like Dubai, right? For me, it still feels like quite manageable and small, honestly. Which is exactly where we want to be.
Like you said that the projects are really tied to each community. How do you
Mhm.
go about figuring out what each community needs?
Um, and I'm gonna say we don't always get it right. It's usually a community that I'm adjacent to, a part of, or it's filling some unmet need. So I was living upstate full time during the pandemic and really felt the absence of like there were all these amazing farms and farm stands, and really felt the absence of a business, frankly, of any kind on Main Street in the town, but of a grocery store. And I thought that that could be a place for people to meet up and kind of connect all these amazing people. So I guess the term is scratching your own itch. You always have an audience of at least one. So I also was living in Brooklyn, wanted to have this place Rucola in Borum Hill. I went to France and there were all these natural wine bars, and I came back and there was like two in New York and none were in Brooklyn. And I was like, we should do that. So it's sort of, and then, got involved in nowadays in Metrograph and Public Records because they were all like really cool places that I would go to. And the primary partners there needed somebody with a bit of food and beverage experience. Um, the wine store, bookstore, I think I thought was just a cool idea. I don't know that that needed to exist, but it's doing well and I like it. And yeah, Rhodora was truly inspired by Doug McMaster, who's like the real visionary in this zero waste space, along with Lauren Singer. So
And part of the process in all of this is bringing in stakeholders early and often, uh,
mhm.
as you operate and as you ideate on kind of the evolution of the programming and all that. One of those things, or those relationships that I would imagine that's critical to get right from the start is that relationship with vendors. How do you approach, creating packaging, strict packaging and sourcing requirements for vendors? And how do you manage that without kind of limiting your menu and alienating your suppliers?
Well, we do limit the menu, and hopefully we haven't alienated the suppliers. Um, it's that one's tough. I think we have a few examples of um there was linens, right? So we wanted to have our own linens, and it comes in this cloth bag, but inside the cloth bag there's a plastic bag. We're like, you guys stop doing that, and they stopped doing it in that case. And then there was another vendor that was I think like a tinned fish vendor. We're doing a lot with tinned fish because it's like kind of like single serving and it really cuts down on food waste. And they were shipping everything in plastic tape. We're like, "Can you guys just use paper tape? We don't really can't really recycle this like single use, non-recyclable tape." And they were like, "Sure." And I hope that they said it made them question why they were using the plastic tape. And even the linen provider was like, why do we be putting this in a bag inside a bag? But I don't know if like that insight actually like extended to their entire supply chain. I will say that most people don't have this entirely self-imposed problem of not being able to throw things out for free, basically. So I don't think that many people are asking, but I think it would be a good thing if more people did, because these vendors I think would be quite flexible, and they were with us. Um, but for sure, we severely curtailed what we could put on the menu to the point where we were like, we will fail if we try to open a restaurant. So um, it's always a push and pull, with no plastic, low carbon, because that you go crazy enough with that, it's like no customers, right? And then it's like your big visionary sustainability idea. There is no sustainable restaurant if you went out of business. So
Right.
you have to push it as far as you can without like pushing yourself over the edge.
Yep.
Something that we talk about a lot is marketing and
Mhm.
how operators market their restaurants and how they make time to market their restaurants. And you made a comment at the beginning about how you're not sure that a lot of people come in and really know your story, or they might just assume that you're saying, oh, we're, zero waste, or we're sustainable, and they're not really doing the due diligence behind, figuring out what you're actually doing. Is there a push to get your story out there more now? I mean, I can imagine if I lived in Brooklyn, I might be more likely to come because of that. And I'm just wondering sort of how you deal with marketing and your story and those types of things.
Yeah, I think to be totally honest, we don't do a lot of marketing. I think we're not so adept at it. Um, I think I'm in a market where if what you make is good and it resonates with people, they will be loyal. And if it's not considered good, there's nothing you can really do about it. There is no amount of marketing that will be enough. So I focus a lot on trying to get the room right, the pricing right, the service right, and just always try to be as good as we can be within our price point. That I really believe that restaurants are kind of first and foremost like successful like geographically. There's like a lot of people that are there and that like you have a nice location and there's not like 100 restaurants like right above you. And then, maybe conceptually, and then, in terms of like, yeah, I really think you kind of have to work with, what you have to work with. And I think for a larger restaurant group opening in different markets, it is really different. But if you're in like a small community where people are walking and having an experience and it's like anywhere from 1 to 10, they're just not going to go back if it's not like an 8 or above. So
Mhm.
that's all the money that we could spend on marketing, we just spend on trying to be good.
Right, and
But
allow the food to speak for itself, or the experience and the hospitality,
yeah,
the all of that.
so the casualty of that is definitely that a lot of people don't know our mission. But um, it's on the menu. There's people that have been to Rhodora 100 times and seen like, carbon neutral, zero waste, and they just kind of read over it because you read over sustainability claims in general.
Mm.
So yeah.
Interesting.
A little bit more on I'm going to pull the thread a little bit more on the guest kind of relationship component of this. I don't think guests always understand kind of what actually goes in to creating sustainable operations.
Yeah.
So, how do you help them understand, like, without making it feel like homework for the average diner? Um, what does that narrative look like? How do you story tell that in a way that resonates with the guest?
I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I think we prepare people to answer questions about like, what does that mean? Is this greenwashing? Zero waste? What does that mean? And everybody on our team knows kind of the drill. But we don't do a ton of table side storytelling about our sustainability because um the way that I kind of describe it is like the things that we do to make the restaurant sustainable are not a legible part of the guest experience. Like if you go to Blue Hill and they bring out like the fighter spinach and like all the things that grown in the garden, you will have like a presentation and kind of like a show that is suffused with sustainability. But that costs, I don't know what it costs lately, but when I went there, it was close to $1,000 for two people, right? For us, all of the sustainable decisions are like where we buy our stuff. Okay, like that's happening, whatever, at midnight, like on the phone in the basement. um, how we prepare our stuff, which is happening behind a door. And then like people get the food, they get the drink. And then the fact that we compost after the fact, again, not really a part of the guest experience. So I don't blame the guest for not um kind of understanding or being confronted with all of the things that we do to make it sustainable because they're simply not it's not salient to their actual reasons for going out or their experience of it. I hope that with time, like guests in, New York become more like guests in Sweden, right? That care a lot about this stuff. And that would come to Rhodora for that reason. But in the meantime, we need to hang on until we get to that moment. So we kind of focus on being like a really groovy natural wine bar. And then we do all the things, not just for us, but because we think it's the right way to operate. Um, so our attempts at storytelling, they haven't been rejected. They've just sort of been like people like just not really even in one of the most like eco self-conscious communities probably in the world, they're just not that compelled when they're at a bar by the story. So
If it's not directly affecting the guest, I can understand why that might if it's not part of your experience, right, then,
yeah,
like
and
you were saying, like at Blue Hill, I understand. Yeah.
and that's why sustainability in restaurants I think is tough because it's all the stuff behind the door. And like when you're behind the door, you kind of just want to do stuff as like quickly and cheaply as possible, right?
Mhm.
And but we're kind of taking all these steps, but we're not doing like kitchen tours. Now the huge exception, like I said, is where we have an audience of like the 0.01% geekiest sustainability people like Ted or we do a ton of things during climate week. When people want to think about climate and food, like we do a ton of stuff. But that's just not our kind of day-to-day bread and butter. But we're really, really happy to do that stuff when people are deciding to think about climate and food for a week or for a day or for whatever.
So, Verdora was designed, I think, as a model for others to learn from, not guests necessarily, but for other operators. And you've talked about some people calling you and asking about how to run an operation like this.
Mhm.
What has the response from other operators been? And have others adopted your approach?
Yeah, I think, we got a lot of press in early 2020 and then COVID happened. And I think that like the pandemic was tough in a lot of ways because the focus became survival and the focus of like reusing things was a really tough message during the pandemic. Um, Even like reusing a mask was just like insane. So like everything was single use. So the momentum that we would have had were an offer that is kind of unknown. But a lot of people have just, called and asked the basic question, like when we're talking about food and sustainability, what are we talking about? And I always say, well, you're either talking about the carbon footprint of your restaurant, which can be measured and can be offset. You're talking about like the kind of food that you're serving, right? Is it like a steak place that's like has relatively high carbon footprint? It's a vegan restaurant, or you're talking about trying to waste less, which affects, kind of the carbon footprint ultimately. But that can kind of blend into like a no single use plastic kind of conversation. When we opened our first restaurant, every restaurant I saw was just putting all their food, all their recycling into black bags, putting it out on the street every night. Um, and you just see these like black bags piled high, no recycling, no even cardboard. It's freaking like cardboard. It's like trash bags. And as a restaurant, the single biggest thing that you can do to be more sustainable is just to compost, just to have a compost pickup. So you're not just like throwing organic matter in landfill where it emits methane. That's it. Like you just want to do one thing on scheduling another pickup and separating the compost at like prep, actually making the food. And then like after people are done with their plate, which are like probably three different bins in different places, that is absolutely massive. And that's probably 90% of the impact. of all of our efforts is just composting.
It's so interesting because there are some places that are so, like you said, like Brooklyn might be one of in the US might be the most sort or one of the most eco-conscious places. But I went a couple, maybe 2 years ago. So I don't know how up to date this information is, but about 2 years ago, I went to a wedding in West Hampton for two dear friends of ours. And I remember we were at someone's house and I said, like, where's the recycling? And they said, though they don't recycle in West Hampton.
Yeah.
Like,
We
we
had a
just like
meeting.
don't recycle. Like there's an entire community of people who just doesn't recycle. It was like, truly mind boggling. I mean, we live in Massachusetts, right? So sort of an equally
Yeah.
liberal, it was just
Hmm.
crazy.
Um, yeah. We were called in to do some consulting for, I think it was Klaus Meyer's like New York operations. Um, and in Grand Central Station, and they were like, "We don't recycle in Grand Central Station." And it was like, "Why not?" It's like, "Well, we would have to have it privately picked up, and that would cost $600,000." And I was like, "There's like 100 businesses in here. I feel like, that's actually like, I don't know, it's a weird question, like, how much would it cost to set up recycling at Grand Central but I feel like you guys can split that up." And they were like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, we can work on that." But I'm like, "You're calling me in to, like, give you
This seems
especially,
like
like."
a pretty obvious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, "You don't wanna know what I'm gonna suggest. Like, just start recycling, start composting, and then we can talk about, looking at your supply chain and, like, decarbonizing it. Start buying renewable power." That's actually usually pretty straightforward in New York. You can't select who distributes the power, it's always Con Ed, but you can select who provides it, and you can select a green operator, and it will be, like, maybe cheaper, maybe a little bit more expensive, but you can do that, like, right now by, like, calling your power company and just switching to
Hmm.
suppliers.
So I'd love to get a sneak peek on the museum project because it sounds incredibly exciting and it's obviously a huge deal for you guys, and I want to hear why.
Well, it's a huge deal for a number of reasons. It was a competitive RFP, and, the museum, Rem Koolhaas's firm, and, they're also doing the restaurant, which will be their first full service restaurant in the world. Um, so that's just a big deal, period. For us, it just checks every box. We get to work with a cultural organization. It's an unbelievable community, downtown our world. They're using Cork to actually sequester carbon in the restaurant itself. The booths are Cork. We have this really beautiful Cork dome, high carbon post recycled Cork that, like I said, I have this degree in sustainability and building, but it's, usually doesn't get a lot of use, capturing carbon into the design, which is super cool. Getting to work with Julia Sherman as a chef, and there's a piece by Ian Chang, and there's furniture by this guy Minjay. When you're doing a museum commission, it just you can put together like a super group of collaborators, which is not generally our thing when it comes to like opening small Brooklyn restaurants, right? That are extremely comfortable, often beloved, sometimes busy, but this is just, downtown Manhattan. So it's a bit of a different thing. Frankly, something I was avoiding doing, but again, because there's a pre-existing community and we're a part of this ecosystem, felt really exciting.